Welcome to the Filmcast review of Barbie. I'm going to read the plot summary from IMDb. Barbie suffers a crisis that leads her to question her world and her existence. End quote. Joining us for this review of Barbie, she is a film critic at the Griot, Brooke Obie. Welcome to the Filmcast.
Hi, thank you for having me.
It's so great to have you here, Brooke. I am curious, for this movie, I think we all had probably a different set of expectations going into this. Huge Greta Gerwig fans here on the podcast. Love Little Women. Lady Bird was great. Kind of what was your relationship to Greta Gerwig, and what were your expectations as you headed into this film?
So I did not have high expectations because I was such a Little Woman fan when I was a kid that I was super disappointed with her version of
Mm.
it, and I didn't really care for Lady Bird, so I didn't have like amazing expectations. And then I saw the trailer and I was like, okay, well this looks fun. So, and I mean, it was just because I played with Barbies, I loved Barbies, so it kind of was giving me that feeling that I had, thinking about Little Women and how much I loved Little Women as a kid. So I was like, I hope she gets it right. And I feel like this is definitely my favorite Greta Gerwig movie that she's made. So yay.
Yay! So tell us your overall thoughts on the movie. What did you think of Barbie overall?
Overall, I love the production design. I think it was so cool that they made Barbie. They said they made her 23% smaller, bigger than her space, so that she looked like a toy. So I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed the feminist rants. Like that gave me a lot of life. I feel like that's pretty typical in a Greta Gerwig movie too. So I enjoyed that. I have notes. I have notes.
All right.
But I did. I thought it was fun. I thought it was funny. I laughed out loud, which I don't usually do in comedies. So this was good.
All right, maybe we can talk about some of those notes during the spoiler section.
Yes.
Looking forward to hearing about it. But Devindra Hardaway, let's go to you. What did you think of Greta Gerwig's Barbie?
You know what? I think this movie is kind of a miracle. Sometimes we watch movies and we're like, how how did any of this actually get made? There's a whole podcast about how did this get made. But watching this movie, which I love so much, I think it's superb on so many levels. Um, but I just kept thinking to myself, like, how did Mattel just they were like okay with this? They're cool with this? Because we just saw a movie several months ago, the Mario movie, which I thought was perfectly fine and fun, but was so watered down and was so so safe, so like on training wheels. That movie, whereas this one's like no, it's directly bashing Mattel and the way girls have relationships to Barbie and the kind of false images that the Barbie model set up, but also of patriarchy and also of capitalism. And there's an ad for a Barbie that I never thought Mattel would allow. It seems like something somebody would put up on YouTube and just be like, "Hey, this is Lonely Island's Barbie commercial" or something like that. No, I think this movie is remarkable. At the same time, I do wonder, is like, man, it is brave. I guess it is brave that Mattel allowed this out there. It's also going to make a lot of money for Mattel, like hundreds of millions of dollars for Mattel. So, I almost wonder if the commentary would be more fitting if it wasn't exactly Barbie, so that they could just comment on it without benefiting Mattel itself. But beyond that, I think it's a really fun movie. It looks like nothing else this year except Asteroid City, which I will talk
Mm.
about on another episode. But the look of it is so interesting. It's kind of a flashback to when movies were just had beautiful painted sets. I think it's all well written. There's a lot going on here because it's an existential crisis, but it's also about the larger systemic forces that kind of defines our world and how like fucked up so much of it is. And I think that part of it is really interesting. Love everybody in the cast. I think it's incredibly well written. This is also one of those movies where it's like every scene is just like you're there for a reason. You're doing work and you're not just fluff. You're not This is a 2-hour long movie. It doesn't feel padded in any way. So, and then it has some great sequences. Like I cannot wait to watch this with my wife. My wife is also a big America Ferrera fan, so I think that it's maybe a little bit of a tough watch for her too, because this movie also goes places that I didn't expect. So yeah, I come away loving this movie, and shout out to Ryan Gosling for being hilarious. Like we know he can be silly, but he's generally great here. Also, I think Simu Liu is better in this movie than he was in his own in Shang-Chi. Like where he had like zero charisma. Here he's at least actually having fun. But maybe he needed Ryan Gosling to like play off against or something to make it happen. So yeah. I
I
love this
just
movie. I think
I
it's
just
great.
saw Simu in
The other
a
two.
yeah, the other two,
Yeah.
and he's very good in that as well.
He's funny when
Um,
he's bouncing off against funny people, so I don't know what happened with Shang-Chi, but you know.
In both cases, very much willing to make himself the butt of the joke,
Yes.
which is
Yes.
yeah,
cool
yeah,
to see for an up and coming leading man.
yeah. I have this like Dave Chen operating theory I'm working on, guys. You know, I'll just float it out there, but it's like
I also have a Dave Chen
it
operating
goes
theory.
it goes something
We all
written
do, in
for
fact.
2 decades now. Yeah.
it goes something like this. It's like humanity is okay with billionaires if we can tell stories about them. Basically, like Batman. We like to imagine we're okay. Everyone's okay with Bruce Wayne because he's like we imagine him crime fighting. We're
Sure.
also okay with giving Mattel, probably billions of dollars as long as we can make fun of them a little bit, which is what's going to happen in this. It's very half baked. I'm still working on it. Jeff Kanata.
Mattel, the Mattel Batman theory.
The Mattel Batman theory. Those are the two canonical billionaires, right? Mattel and Batman.
The only two.
The only ones that are worth considering. Jeff Kanata, tell us about your thoughts on Barbie.
I guess you could say my thoughts on Barbie are best summed up in the form of a limerick.
This is Brooke's first time here on the Filmcast. Maybe we should explain why.
Please.
Yeah, I apologize, Brooke. I would not want to subject you to this. No one wants it. If you imagine our podcast like a big monolithic corporation, Dave would be the guy sitting behind the half-circle desk surrounded by lots of other dudes dictating what we do. And in this case, he has decided that it is imperative that each episode have a limerick, and it has fallen to me to carry that burden. I don't like it. Devindra doesn't like it. None of us likes it, but Dave rules this corporation with an iron patriarchal fist, and that's just the way it is.
I am the hapless Will Ferrell of the Filmcast. That is
Yeah.
correct. All right. So, Jeff, thank you for that introduction. Hit us with a limerick.
These days, it takes retro IP to make cultural commentary. Despite what it seems, the house ain't the dream. It's how much better we all can Barbie.
Oh, okay, that was very good, Jeff.
Very
That
good.
was very good. Yeah,
Thank you.
I love when the word has a double meaning. Very nicely done, Jeff.
I also loved this movie. I walked in the door after seeing this movie and told my wife, I will take the kids, call a friend, set up a time. You need to go see this. I tried to take her to the screening I went to, but we couldn't secure childcare. My wife and I don't get to see movies together anymore. It's just the way it is. But I was like, I will, whatever it takes. I need you to go see this in the movie theater, not wait till it comes home. And I wish she had had an opportunity to see it before we recorded, because I would love to know what my wife's reaction to the movie was. I saw this at at one of those what do they call them? There was like pre-screenings, but they were open to the public.
Screenings.
They
Yeah.
had like these fan screenings, these kind of event screenings, and I would say easily 80% of the audience I was in there with was dressed up. It was a whole thing, pretty wild. Anyway.
I wish there was like a broader note about that. I guess I noticed people were dressing in pink, but for some reason yesterday I was dressed in all blue. So I was just like this one guy in the middle of the crowd, surrounded by super pink. Like, I want to see this movie. Yeah,
That was me the first time I saw it, and the guy next to me was like, "So no pink." So the second time I saw it, I definitely wore pink, and I brought it today. But.
Devindra in his He-Man Woman Haters Club shirt.
Yeah, it's like, no, I want to see the movie. I'm not a Reddit guy. Yeah.
I loved this movie. I think it is a marriage of a very, very funny, goofy comedy with biting, insightful social commentary, which is a very difficult thing to pull off, I think. And this movie pulls it off effortlessly. It is a wonderful homage to the IP. I grew up playing Barbie. I grew up on a cul-de-sac, and there were a bunch of families with kids my age, and I was the only boy. So it was like me and 7 girls in the cul-de-sac. So I would like bargain free time, and I'd be like, okay, I'll play Barbies if you guys will play tag with me or whatever. And so
Were
I
you
played
the Ken or
lots.
the Alan in this situation?
I wasn't aware of Alan. I
I
only
love
knew
Alan.
Ken.
Yeah.
I mean, Alan may have come after my. I don't know, whatever it was, but I played lots of Ken. I'll tell you, lots of Ken. Anyway, I loved the homage to the IP and the references to all the real deep cuts. If you're a big Barbie fan or have knowledge of that stuff, I like how the movie took time to actually be about that history and that lore. It very much reminds me of the Lego movie, which the year it came out was my top movie of the year. And I think this movie does equally well service to that IP, the IP that it is, its namesake, but also in the same way that the Lego movie is about something. And I think, Devindra, you're right to call out Mario, which had no intention of even attempting to be about anything. It just, here's the IP. But I love that this movie, they had the confidence to use these filmmakers that you are used to making movies that are about something and leverage that on an IP that has such a big cultural footprint.
I had an out of body experience watching the opening credits, and all the opening credits are in like Barbie font, right?
Yeah.
And pink Barbie font, and it's like written by Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach, and I was like, wow, what a world we live in today,
Yeah. I mean, these are filmmakers that very much know how to make movies about quarter and midlife crises, And so it's really interesting to make that about Barbie. I do not think this is a movie that is for kids. I don't think this is a movie. This is a movie for people that grew up with Barbie, grew up playing Barbie and now are adults. It does not feel like a kid's movie to me.
It's America Ferrera's movie. To me, I thought definitely she was the star of the movie, and that made me feel like comfortable being there too, because I felt like this was marketed to the millennials of America Ferrera's generation. It's not Gen Z. They're I don't know, are they Bratz people? I don't know who they play with.
Wow.
That was after my time. I don't know.
That's
but
cold,
definitely for us. No, I'm with you with the nostalgia. I saw Totally Hair Barbie, which was one of my favorite Barbies growing up. Like, I haven't seen that in like 20 years. So, but the clothes, I loved it.
I have more questions for Brooke, but Jeff, I want to make sure you finish what you're saying.
I just to wrap up, I was a little worried at the beginning because the movie begins almost exactly like the Lego movie begins, almost like note for note, like, hey, we're going to start where
there's one thing, Jeff, that the Lego movie doesn't have: a nod to freaking 2001.
Well,
yes. A Barbie movie.
I don't mean that scene. That's brilliant and wonderful. But this notion of the toy having this perfect existence as a toy, having a musical number talking about how great the existence is as a toy, and then the real world sort of encroaching on that. And I went, oh no, is this really going to play out as in that same template? Even though that, I loved that for the Lego movie. But very quickly, this movie kind of establishes its own identity, and it does things and goes places that I did not expect, and I thought were brilliant. I think the vocabulary of this movie, as far as establishing, the magic of this movie, the non-reality fantasy elements of this movie, is really, I love how bold and effortless it is. It's like, don't even worry about it; it just works, and you go along with it. I agree with Brooke that the production design is worth seeing the movie alone for. The fact that they actually built this stuff is so delightful to see. It's a home run for me. This movie could be on my top 10 of the year list. It wasn't on my top 10 grossing year list.
Listen, we are all taking the beating on the summer movie this year.
This movie is a delight. I loved it. It's so fun. It's so funny. It's goofy and also serious at the same time. And it's a home run for me.
I want to just give a shout out also, not just to the production design and the art direction, which you all have shouted out and I think is excellent, right? Like visually it looks incredible, but just like the conception of the world, like the idea of Barbie Land and how that all functions and like the mechanics of it, I think are just really smart. It's a world that makes you want to learn more about how it works and explore it more. Brooke, I am curious, we've heard about Jeff's childhood experiences with Barbie. Curious about what your attitude was about Barbie going into this movie, and how you feel like the movie handled the idea of Barbie. You know, we can save some more details for spoilers, but I guess like, were you somebody who had a lot of affection for Barbie and thought that the movie honored that, or did you have a love-hate relationship? Like, what did you think about Barbie growing up?
So I think the important thing that I remember from my childhood was that my mother went out. We lived in Nebraska, and she went to every store that she could to find black Barbies for us to play with. And so I didn't grow up with this concept of looking at something that like didn't look anything at all like me, that I would literally never be. So which, is a huge criticism of Barbie that they try to address in the movie. But yeah, I had a lot of affection for Barbie. I was one of those people who played with Barbies too long. I definitely remember the day when people like, "You're still playing with Barbie?" Like,
it was Tuesday.
Yeah. It was just like, as a writer now and a creator myself, like it was a place where I learned, how to imagine and how to bring things to life, out of my own mind, and to trust that and to do it by myself if I had to. So I did have a lot of affection for that. I don't think that the movie honored that, which is, a part of my critique. There was a great cast. But I definitely feel like it was diversity for diversity's sake. This was very much stereotypical Barbie's like story. We don't really hear from the other diverse Barbies, as far as, like the wheelchair Barbie. I think her
No
name.
lines.
No,
Yeah.
there's two wheelchair Barbies, and they say
Yep.
nothing during the entire movie. Like there's, my mom bought me Barbies that also were like from different countries. Like I had like a Barbie and a Ken from Spain, and they had like, the traditional dress and all of that. Like I learned things about other countries from Barbie. So like
Wow.
here, it just kind of felt like, yes, we're sprinkling people in, but like if all the Barbies were white, like it would not have changed the character that we saw. It would not change the dialogue that we saw. It wouldn't have changed anything at all. So I definitely feel like, there's definitely a critique for me of, diversity for diversity's sake and not, anything concrete there.
Right. That's fascinating. Like that playing with Barbies was like a generative space for you when growing up, and like the movie kind of didn't reach that height. I haven't heard that perspective. I'll share a few thoughts, and then we get to spoilers for Barbie. I thought as with many movies I've watched this year, I thought the first half to 2/3 of this movie was awesome. I loved it. I was like, this is one of my favorite movies of all time. Like so good, so smart, so funny. I didn't know that Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach could write like something that was so that uses IP in such a funny way. That's like it feels like a conventional comedy for much of the movie, where there's like big setup payoff, like visual gags that look like they cost hundreds of thousands of dollars just for like a 5-second joke in the movie. I loved it, and then it starts commenting on the world of Barbie, and I'm like, oh, this is great. And then by the end, I feel like it kind of collapses under the weight of its own ideas. Like it's trying to throw too many things at you. There's characters in the movie that literally just say the themes of the movie, which I always am not a fan of. And so I do think it kind of loses it by the end. That said, had a great time watching it. The cast is amazing. The design is amazing. It's fun. It's also, in my opinion, very weird. And I salute
Weirdness
movies.
is good.
Being released in theaters. Apparently, the marketing budget for this movie was estimated at around $150 million. I salute putting $150 million behind weird ass films and putting them in theaters, and also those movies making a shit ton of money. So
yeah,
I'm fine with all that. So overall, like I still have positive feelings, but it got a little rough at the end, and we'll talk about that momentarily. So anyway, any other last second thoughts before we get to spoilers, or shall we hit it? Here we go.
I do want to shout out, this movie solidifies my idea that Will Ferrell needs to play Elon Musk in the eventual Twitter movie, because like a failed so-called genius CEO, just like man-child leading Twitter, especially after the news this year. Like, I want to see that movie happen or something.
Mhm. I'm not sure it'll be called the Twitter movie, Devindra. It might be
It'll
called
be called the
The
X.
X
Yeah.
movie. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Which will make it very hard to Google.
Yeah.
Indeed. Let's get to spoilers for Barbie starting right now. Let's start real quick by talking about the setup part of this movie. I love this whole thing, Barbie Land, the idea of Barbie Land in the real world. And Jeff, as you said, the vocabulary they use. My favorite part of the movie is when somebody asks, "So is Barbie some kind of imaginary world or more of a this thing?" And then everyone just responds yes at the same
Yes.
time.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
doesn't matter. Don't even
Doesn't
think too
matter.
hard about the
How do you
mechanics
get
about it.
there? You take
It doesn't matter.
rollerblades and then a boat.
Whatever.
Like that's there's
It's
no.
Yeah, it's
It's a
great.
reminder
But
of like movies from the 80s and 90s too, like Muppet movie, logic or something
Definitely
like that. Like, it just,
great pull.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
yeah.
I love that like anybody could do it. Like Will Ferrell and his team could just do it. They could just
Yeah.
go there. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
But I love like as you said, Brooke, like the way that the characters and the space interact is really amazing. Margot Robbie as stereotypical Barbie, like taking a shower, but there's no water, drinking cup, but there's no water in it, like no milk in it. Like all the mechanics of the world are really great. And it reminds you of like, oh, how these things used to be played with when we were children.
If she needs to get down from the second floor, she just floats down because somebody can pick her up and bring her
Somebody can
down.
pick her up, yeah.
Yeah.
Did you have any kind of favorite components of that, Brooke, or anything you didn't like about that?
No, I love that. No, that was definitely really great because it did give me the actual feeling of playing with dolls. And then yes, it was full nostalgia. Even traveling back and forth, I definitely had the rollerblade Barbie doll. I definitely had the camping trailer camping Barbie. So no, I loved the movement of the bar. I mean, Margot Robbie, I think, is just really, really great at like acting like a doll. I thought she did a really great job with that. So no, it was great. I love that.
Yeah. So then some stuff starts happening to Margot Robbie, right? She starts like cellulite starts appearing on her body, and she stops being able to walk with completely. I don't even know what that foot formation is called. On tiptoes, right? Like
yeah.
she stops. Her the back of her foot starts hitting the floor. She starts thinking about death, and you realize that the person who's playing with her probably is also thinking about death, and that's what's going on. So Barbie goes to the real world to try to figure out what's happening, and then you realize, like, oh, the dolls can like manifest in reality. I do think there's a lot of this movie having its cake and eating it too, right? Like, it is a critique of Barbie while at the same time benefiting Barbie and Mattel, making Barbie and Mattel millions of dollars.
We'll never get past that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Unfortunately.
and I do think I do think that makes it a little bit different than the Lego movie, because I don't think the Lego movie ever it tried to critique like some very minor components of Lego, like the idea of
Like
using
how you play
instruction,
with it.
yeah, how you play with them, but it wasn't a critique of the world that Lego has created. Do you know?
I don't think they've created the same world. I feel like there's been a lot more pressure on Barbie and what she's responsible for than Lego.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think this is most clear in the scene which I really loved, when Margot Robbie's Barbie goes to confront the child that she thinks is playing with her, and that gets completely eviscerated.
Don't interact with teens. They're scary.
That's
completely dismantled.
That's rule number one.
And Margot Robbie's just so happy, like she thinks she's gonna be welcomed, like with so much warmth, and then to get that response is like so crushing. But yeah, Brooke, I guess I'm curious, like, what did you think of some of the critiques that this movie leveled against Barbie?
So I definitely feel like Greta was trying to make this critique proof by putting all of the criticisms that could possibly be in the movie itself. But I don't know, that scene especially was very much like the time that Sheryl Sandberg realized that Lean In was a bunch of crap, and was horrible advice for anybody who was not a rich white woman with a partner. So I don't know. I was like, I thought it didn't move me, because I felt like I was seeing, the writers try to make sure that whatever we were going to say as audience members, that they were going to cover it. Even the time
Right.
that I don't want to skip ahead, but
No, it's cool. Go ahead. Yeah.
so, there's this moment where the narrator, Helen Mirren, says like, oh, if you're going to call somebody, if you're going to have a doll call themselves ugly, don't have her be played by Margot Robbie. Like, why not just take that out? Like, it's nonsense. Like,
It's
I
a
just
joke.
like,
I think it's a joke.
People
it's
laughed.
Yeah,
People laughed, but it's also just like, that friend that's self-aware but doesn't change.
Yeah.
So it's like self-awareness is step one, honey. Like, move on to the
I
next
agree.
part of it.
That line was weird to me because I'm like, okay, but didn't the filmmaker write that line? It's like I agree with you. It's kind of like lampshading, I think, is the term that's used for this, right? When like the movie criticizes itself so that you can't do it, and I do think there's a lot of that in this film.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's sort of a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation, though.
Exactly.
Because if there is no commentary like that about Barbie as a phenomenon, then everybody is complaining about how the movie is toothless and unwilling to confront that stuff.
I kind of like the way it was handled, just because Helen Mirren's delivery in that line just feels like a note from a friend, like note to the filmmakers. Margot Robbie probably not the best person to make this point. And I think that,
yeah. Brooke, go ahead. Yeah.
I'm also just wondering, like, why couldn't her arc be something different? Like, why does her arc have to be, oh, now I'm ugly because? And I was also just like, why? Why are you ugly? I didn't.
She has one cellulite. She has one patch of cellulite.
But I feel like she always had she's had at this point in the movie, she's had cellulite, she's had flat feet for a while, but it's like Ken taking over her house and she can't talk him out of it is now why she's ugly, I guess. I don't really understand quite how she got to that place where she was just like, now I'm ugly and weird.
My interpretation wasn't so much now I'm ugly, it's I'm no longer perfect.
Yeah, I'm broken.
Life is no longer perfect.
Yeah.
This notion of yesterday was perfect, tomorrow's going to be perfect, every day is perfect, has been shattered in a number of ways, and now perfection is no longer attainable. And what do I do in a world that is imperfect, flawed, and I have to think about death? Like that to me, it wasn't so much ugliness, it's more like flaws. The world has flaws.
If she had said that, there would have been no need for the Helen Mirren line, which again was a good joke. I mean, people laughed in the audience, but I feel like I could at least be like, I'll follow you here with that. Like, yes, but also,
Jeff, you should have been a co-writer on the Barbie movie. Is what we're learning.
I mean, yes, it wouldn't take any of my letters.
Brooke, go ahead. Finish what you're saying, Brooke.
I just kind of felt like, I don't know. It's just kind of a very. It was I feel like Greta Gerwig's movies all kind of give this like very like white feminist idea of like what is bad and how we fix it. And it just goes to that, you know what I'm saying? Like, okay, your life isn't perfect anymore. Like,
it's sort of,
and having a Latina, like, I mean, having a Latina be the person, I mean, like, it felt very white feminist fantasy to me. Like, having a Latina
woman like help her self-actualization,
yes, and be the source of that and be the cause of that. And I was just like,
it's like so many stories about your housekeeper or something helping you find yourself. There is that. I will say, I think the whole point there is like she is stereotypical Barbie, and it seems like she took that particular role pretty like that's her identity, that's everything. So I related more to like an existential crisis. Like, well, that's what I was. That's all I ever was. Now I'm not stereotypical, right? Now I'm not the prime example of everything that Barbie should be. So who am I? I feel like, that's like very something we'd relate to like in middle age, where you start to question yourself. We haven't really talked much about the America Ferrera stuff. And I just want to say, like, again, sometimes this year, like we've got movies that just feel like so devastating in some ways. And the story of a mother who just cannot connect with her daughter anymore is just like spiraling through like a lens of depression just feels very real. Like my wife and I are dreading that moment when our daughter is
teenage years.
Teenage years are going to be rough. And for moms, especially. And I think like the movie specifically says that too, like dads don't get to see the worst of it. I love the dad too, the asides to the dad. I'm learning Spanish. I'm contributing.
So funny.
I think all those little bits are really are really sharp and really
Yeah.
smart and funny. Yeah.
I have some more thoughts on that, Jeff. I'm sorry. I know we cut you off earlier, Jeff.
No,
Did
that's
you?
okay.
Yeah. Okay.
My biggest qualm with the Helen Mirren. I mean, if you can get Helen Mirren, you always get Helen Mirren, right? That's just a given. But it doesn't make any sense. Rhea Perlman should have been the narrator, right? It just makes sense thematically that Rhea Perlman is narrating this story, and then we meet her, and then we find out who she is, and she was
Helen
narrating.
Mirren Helen Mirren play Ruth or something.
But
But
why have them be two different?
Yeah.
Why have? Yeah.
There are 3 narrators because Lizzo narrates the first part of it.
Right.
She's like singing all the movements every single day of everything that's happening. So yeah, it's 3 people telling the story.
I thought was very funny, by the way.
Yeah,
it was great. It was great.
The second version of the song the death version of the song was very funny.
It was very good.
Yeah.
Very good. But yeah, it's true. It's like, this would be like having Brian Cox and Albert Finney in a movie. You know, like, why would you do this to me, Bourne Ultimatum? Anyway, I agree. It's not necessary. It's not necessary.
Well, it just feels like we don't have any context as to who Helen Mirren is other than she's Helen Mirren.
Yeah.
But we have the perfect the creator should have been the narrator. It doesn't make it just.
It almost feels like with the opening, because it's the opening that really sets the tone of it. And so Helen Mirren is God, right? Like, she is just the all-seeing narrator of everything. And if it's Helen Mirren is God, then yes, I understand. She understands everything.
But Rhea Perlman is supposed to be God. Like, they make that very
Barbie,
clear.
Yeah. At the end, she's the one that Barbie's talking to at the end.
He is the creator, literally the creator. Yeah.
It's odd.
They probably had the opening for it. Like, I don't know. You get a name right there. Wouldn't it be funny if Helen Mirren was narrating our movie? I feel like that's it. That's the joke, and they went for it. Yeah.
I will say, so going back to the America Ferrera stuff, I really was deeply moved by that whole plot line, this whole subplot. It's flashing back. You think it's the girl that is playing with Barbie, but then it's actually America Ferrera's character that's playing with Barbie. And also, I think Billie Eilish is like singing that song that's happening in the background, and I was just like, I felt the full weight of our pop culture infrastructure.
It's everything,
being brought to bear to move me. You have Billie, some of the most talented filmmakers, musical artists, and so on, like, to just deliver this emotional gut punch. And it worked. It worked.
I mean, it's kind of what I was trying to get to with the limerick, is that it's just a weird place that we're in culturally, where these films that are ostensibly about children's toys are made for 30 and 40-year-olds that grew up with them, right? That we, as a generation, or multiple generations at this point, can only view our world through the lens of these capitalist ideas that were inserted into our brains as very young children. Like, the entire prism through which we interpret the world as it is now happens through the 80s and 90s commercials that we were fed. Like Barbie is a toy, yes, but she was a commercial, right? That's what the Transformers, G.I. Joe, they're all just commercials, basically. And I think that it's a very odd, I mean, somebody's going to write a thesis paper on this if they haven't already, but it's such an odd place that in generations of kids, or generations of adults now, of which I am one, like, we're being, the only mainstream big entertainment that we're given is like, hey, remember when you were 6? Like, let's reinterpret the world through that lens.
Right.
It's very odd. And I don't think my parents' generation had anything like that.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
They had
I
the
don't know.
Brady
I don't know if
Bunch
it's
movie
like
when that came back.
The what?
The Brady Bunch movie, the Flintstones.
That's
movie?
not my
That
parents'
was there in the
generation.
90s.
That's the 70s. My parents were having me in that at that time. For my dad, it would be like if they were making a Lone Ranger movie that was, talking about anything remotely interesting, like, or I don't know, like if they did a remake of American Graffiti, and it was like about that kind of stuff. It's just there's just no comparison. It's
weird.
I don't know if it's like the only way we can interpret culture, Jeff, but I agree with you completely. It is the culture that is being created. Like, it is the only culture that's being fed to us. If you look at the top 5 movies at the box office, it's like other than Oppenheimer, it's like pre-existing IP, sequel, pre-existing IP. It's like all that stuff. So
And
I agree. Yeah.
these, listen, I'm the last person to have any leg to stand on in criticizing it because of my love of these things and love of Marvel and all that stuff. But it is all
But
infantile.
it's because of people like you that this world exists, Jeff, I think is what
No,
you're
I
saying.
believe me. I tell you all the time that I feel like we're in a monkey paw world
Jeff,
where I was
monkey
like,
paw of this world.
I love Marvel and Star Wars. It should all be Marvel and Star Wars. It's like,
It is worth pointing out though, like we see so much garbage come out from that us reassessing our past and nostalgia repackaged to for us. This feels different, I'd say, and I think it's worth noting when these things are trying to say something and are trying to work with our relationship with these things, and at least tries. It's not perfect. I think the Lego movie did that pretty well. It is fascinating because pop culture consumes so much of our lives, and it was not always this way. Like the way we live with culture in general is so different. I saw film critic Matt Zoller Seitz pointing out, like, it's really weird. My kids listen to the same music I listened to when I was a kid, and like that sort of cycle just never dies. Like we are in infinite culture, like, you're gonna have adults trying to reckon with what happened to them in the past, and a lot of that's gonna be weird, but at least this is interesting. At least this is trying to say something, I guess.
Well, Brooke, go ahead, hit us.
On the point of trying to say something, I feel like they're trying to get credit for trying to say something rather than actually saying something. Like, it's very, like, Will Ferrell kind of spells it out. He's like, yes, like, let's talk about these things while also letting me retain all of my power and control. Like, nothing shifts. Even in the Barbie movie world, like, nothing really shifts as far as power dynamics. And I don't think that they're trying to, shift power dynamics in, from the audience perspective, like, get us to do things in a different way. Like, I don't think that's kind of the purpose at all. It's just, we kind of have to talk about these criticisms that we're probably going to get. And, let's get credit for that while also maintaining everything pretty much the same.
Right.
Like, even
the status quo is maintained.
The status quo is maintained, and I think that that's the only way that Mattel puts $300 million behind a movie is if the status quo can be maintained. Like, they're not going to tomorrow have, a woman executive board, like the CEO is not suddenly like, this movie is not going to, spur people to call for that kind of a change to happen. We're just going to,
I don't know. I mean,
enjoy and keep it moving.
There might, I totally respect what you're saying, and I think you're right on a fundamental level. But I also think, like, art can plant seeds, right? I feel like one of the reasons that I came home and was like, my wife I want you to go see that, is that she's kind of going through a work transition right now, and she's trying to have the confidence to empower herself to, like, bet on herself. And I felt like this is one of those movies that you come out going, yeah, I mean, you know what? The patriarchy, I don't know. I think, I don't mean to overstate it. And I totally see what you're saying, Brooke. And I think that you have, it's very true. But I also think there's like a spark of something. It's like, it's better that they're talking about it than not, maybe.
I mean, it's like when Sheryl Sandberg said Lean In was actually bad. Like, did she give back the money that she made from selling? Like, no. Like, so, I mean, I feel like it's a step one. And I think, there is a way in the world where they could have actually shifted power dynamics in, like, a real way. Like, America Ferrera, you should be CEO now. Like, she gets to make ordinary Barbie because some men said this will probably make a bunch of money. Like, nothing changes for America Ferrera other than, like, she has a closeness with her daughter, which is really, really great. But she still is the secretary to a bunch of morons. Like, nothing, you know what I mean? So I feel like when you want to plant a seed, like, I think there are ways, like, if that's actually what you want to do, you can do some different things. And I feel like if she wanted, to show a diverse world, like, she could have actually done that. But, like, even there's a really, really gross joke about, like, the reason why the Barbies, were succumbing to patriarchy is because they weren't immune to it, like the indigenous with smallpox. Like, why mention that? Like, I feel like there are things, like, if you really, really want to do something, then
Yeah, yeah,
but even
yeah.
so I feel like the way that she did do it in a way that I think was really powerful, and the greatest fantasy ever is having America say her feminist rant and have that unbrainwashed women. I would love that. I would
Mhm.
love to be able to go on my rants and have people be like, oh my god, like it was like a cloud has lifted from my. So I loved that part. I feel like that's the thing where it's like you're putting the fantasy into the movie to one day make it a reality. Like that's a seed for me that somebody could be like, you know what? I'm hearing what this person is saying, and this is and things need to actually change. But I feel like overall, like the intention was not to make change, but to definitely get credit for ribbing Mattel, which
Mhm.
then also went on to make Mattel a whole lot of money and will
Yeah,
continue
we're
to do
never
so.
gonna escape that. I do wanna say if it ended with America Ferrera becoming CEO, I would have called more bullshit because the
On the
reality of the
Barbie movie.
situation on the Barbie movie, that would have been more like, yes, that's entirely what we're saying. It is just a movie. Like, it's not gonna fix the real world problems. If they did that in the movies, like, that's the end of the movie, I would call more bullshit
Well,
because that would never
Then the
happen. Like,
toy
nothing
coming
like
to life.
but I
No,
kind of
I'm saying, like, we're talking about
I'm kind of with Brooke on this one. Like
yeah.
the point of the movie,
Mhm.
or many points of the movie, is to offer some fantasy of what it would
Sure,
be
sure,
like
sure.
if you could actually upend the patriarchy. So the idea that even in the fantastical film, the woman can't get the job that she deserves, presumably, uh, it's sad, right? Like it's
I
a
think we
bummer.
can argue this both ways, guys. But if we're talking about like a lasting impact of a movie like this, like if that ended that way and we come out in the real world and Mattel's just nothing's going to change at Mattel, like that's not actually a thing. To me, a false win is more to just hurts more and annoys me more than the reality of like, well, she's here and maybe she'll get something else, but at the end of the day, the dumb men still rule the world, and I think the movie kind of acknowledges that too. So
But
that's
what
just what's interesting. Yeah.
But what if all of those CEOs going to Barbie Land
Mhm.
in its restored state, have some, again, the feminist rant
Sure, sure.
unbrainwashes them. You know what I'm like? There was
Yeah.
potential to do something
Mhm.
here, and they were just like, no thanks. And so I
Yeah.
definitely think it hurts more to, have diversity for diversity's sake, to, make all these, weird, not have any indigenous representation as a Barbie. I know America Ferrera is like part indigenous in some way, but like not have an indigenous Barbie, but make that really gross joke. Like I, I don't know. I would much rather a fantasy that actually shows how this can work or what should happen, and not just have the women be unbrainwashed and also unbrainwash the men. Because I feel like that's kind of a part of it too, right? You're showing how gender is harmful to everybody. Like
Mhm.
these
Yeah.
boxes that we're put in by society based on what our assigned gender is, it's trapping all of us, and it's keeping all of us, pretty much like unhappy to a certain degree. And I don't know, I feel like they threw that message away at the end by having her go to the gynecologist as the big joke. Like that felt like kind of bioessentialist to like becoming a real woman means having like a vagina or whatever. And I'm just like, why? Like
Mm.
that's
Yeah.
kind of the whole point of Barbie. Like they don't have, gender is constructed, and we are whatever we feel like based on whatever we are. And so I thought that was a really good message. Having all these guys wear pink, like you're showing this does not define what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman. We can all do this. So why end on that note? So that's the part I just felt like that was a little, to me, like for giving us an idea of what it could be, and then just kind of snatching it away because, well, this is the real world and it's a Barbie movie and it didn't have to be the real world because it's not the real world. So
Yeah. Yeah. I'm with you, Brooke. Let's talk about one other thing before we wrap up here. I do think I think Margot Robbie was excellent in the movie, playing stereotypical Barbie.
Mhm.
She has doll like qualities. I wanted to shout out Ryan Gosling as Ken. I thought this is one of the best like comedic performances of the year. Really enjoyed kind of his obliviousness and then his subsequent toxicity.
It's so easy. Like the ease with which
Yeah.
it is imbued in him, I think is again another one of those like I think smart things this movie is saying, because it does happen. It happens to a lot of guys, and they just don't understand. They just don't get it, but it is a thing. Yeah.
Can I play guitar at you?
Especially that song,
So
which I've
funny.
never really listened to the lyrics before. I'm like, oh, that's shitty. That's awful. It's on the radio during dates. What?
Well, it is funny how so much of the music in this movie is from a very specific time period.
Yeah.
That is my formative years.
Brooke, I am curious what you thought about Ken and whether that worked for you.
I thought Ryan Gosling was great. I do think there was too much Ken. I'm sorry. I was like, why is he talking? And again, I felt like it was another example of where she's baking in the criticism, so that and then trying to like rebut it in some way. Like, this is Barbie's movie, not Barbie and Ken. So like, why does Ken have two singing numbers and they're back to back?
Very good though.
Barbie has zero. Barbie has zero singing moments, and Margot Robbie can sing. So why is Ken doing like I felt like he took up.
It did feel like he took over like
as men do. As men do. I felt like he took up quite a bit of space.
Just a second, Brooke. Let me talk about that.
Perhaps obviously a commentary on how men do that, a meta commentary on how men do that in the real world. I'm just joking. I agree. I agree with you. It did strike me as odd that he was like, he arguably has a more interesting arc than Barbie.
He does. He absolutely does. Because that's real thing. Like, to teach men that like you have other things that you don't have to define your manhood based on like what woman, is beside you or like as a power, dynamic. You can define masculinity outside of these things. That's a great story. Like, I used to be perfect and now I'm not. Like, all right. Tell me more, Margot Robbie. Like,
but I think that's one of the things I liked about the movie is it ultimately has a compassionate message, right? Like, you don't have to be defined. Like, it is ultimately like uncompassionate if anyone is defined purely by who they are in relationship to, right? And ideally, you see that not only for Ken, but for women in the real world, like that it's the inversion, right, of what's going on in Barbie Land versus the real world. So I do hope that people get that point, but I agree with you, Brooke. It's weird that they're using a massive subplot for Ken to make that point, right? Given that it's Barbie's movie. So,
I want to say one other quick thing that moved me.
Did I characterize her correctly, Brooke, or what?
Oh, go for it. Yes.
Sorry, no. Please. I thought there was a pause there.
No, there is.
What I thought about I have a 5-year-old daughter who has Barbies, plays with Barbies. I have played Barbies with her. The sequence at the end with all of the sort of real footage of women and girls. That's sort of this montage of, it looks like, a lot of home video footage and just, not actors, real people, made me cry. I was crying just because, this toy, as Brooke, as you've spoken to very eloquently early on in our review, it does mean something to people, and it does there is a connection to imagination and imaginative play that I see in my daughter. And I just thought that was a really beautiful sequence to put in the film to show, non-actors, not in this glossy, grand, beautifully shot context. It's just like people. And I thought that was lovely.
Yeah. It is a movie that ultimately tries to be a celebration of the thing while also critiquing the thing. And varying different people have different opinions on how effectively it pulls off each of those things, right? So, but I agree, it was nice. Brooke, I am curious, like, were there any Barbie lore references that you appreciated? Because there's a lot of it's actually I found the fan service to be a little bit annoying, to be honest with you. Like, I think fan service is great when it's subtle and you don't even realize it, but multiple points are like, they actually sold one of these. They actually, hey, this is a real. They
Well,
actually
because I
sold
don't
one of
think
these.
most people would get it half the time. That like
the
we're not
dog.
just inventing some goofy thing for this movie, you know?
Yeah, it's fair. It's fair, but I love, I would have preferred. Anyway, Brooke. All that said, are there any sort of shout outs that you enjoyed?
I liked the dog pooping. I definitely remember that dog. For sure. But yeah, I think that's a part of like why we didn't really need Helen Mirren at all. Like that we didn't need that. I mean, I think the people who
Right.
got it would have got it. And if you didn't get it, it's still like, what is going on? That's such a weird thing. That's kind of funny, So but
Yeah.
yeah, I love the dog. Weird Barbie. Everybody destroyed a Barbie at some point in time. Like, and just the idea that they would go into Barbie land and be consistently destroyed, like always in the splits. I thought that was hilarious because, of course, my Barbies were definitely like that. I never drew on them, but I absolutely cut their hair before and did all of that. So I loved those. I loved those ideas.
I thought it was cool when they were tossing the outfits in the air and it would pause and be like, like it was the recreation of an actual outfit that was sold. It was pretty cool.
I was just like, my mind was blown by the idea of the Barbie that had the video camera, and then like
Yes.
you can use. There's a screen in her back. And, yeah, if I had Barbies as a kid, I would have probably used that one a lot, just because I'll have to experiment with the cameras. Okay. Any other thoughts, or shall we wrap it up there on Barbie? But I think Brooke, really appreciate you sharing some of these criticisms with us. I think they're very valid, and but it seems like even despite those, you still had a fun time at the movie, right?
I definitely had a fun time. Yeah. I love, and also in my screening, when the pink WB logo came up, the audience like booed. And somebody was like, "Pay your writers," and then we all cheered. So we were in North Hollywood, right in WB's backyard, and so that felt really good. It was like, yeah, people. Well, at least they're losing the message in their own backyard, at least. But it felt like, yeah, we're on the same page here. And then yesterday at my screening, this cute little black girl with afro puffs, she raised her fist and said, "Fight the power," after America's big speech. So the audience going experience was lovely. It was so fun. Everybody had a great time. So
wonderful. Well, at the end of the day, it is really impressive that Greta Gerwig made a movie. Thank you so much for watching this video of the Filmcast. Check out these other videos that we have available, and be sure to hit like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon to get other videos from us in the future.
You can also go to thefilmcast.com to catch all of our audio podcast versions of all of our episodes.
And support this podcast at patreon.com/filmpodcast, where you can sign up for ad-free episodes and exclusive After Darks.
Thanks so much to everyone who makes the Filmcast possible.